The last entry in the logbook of Ashford Point Lighthouse was written on November 14, 1987, at exactly 11:47 p.m. The handwriting started steady, the same meticulous cursive that Keeper Thomas Marlowe had used for 17 years of service. But halfway through the sentence, the letters began to shake. They stretched and twisted across the page like something had grabbed his wrist, like something was pulling him away from the desk. The sentence simply reads, "The light has gone out and something is climbing the—" That's it. That's where it ends. No period. No conclusion. Just that horrible, incomplete thought frozen in time for 37 years. Thomas Marlowe was never seen again. His body was never recovered. The Coast Guard found the lighthouse door standing wide open, the beacon dark for the first time since 1923, and that logbook sitting exactly where he'd left it. They searched the rocks below. They dragged the waters around the island. They found nothing. Not his coat. Not his boots. Not a single trace that Thomas Marlowe had ever existed beyond those trembling final words. The lighthouse was decommissioned 3 months later. Officially, budget cuts. Unofficially, no one would take the position. They automated the light in 1988 and left Ashford Point to the gulls, the storms, and whatever else might be waiting there in the dark. I'm telling you this because last Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 4 a.m. It was my Aunt Margaret Holloway. She's 73 years old, sharp as a razor, and the current president of the Blackwater Historical Society in coastal Maine. In all my years of knowing her, I had never once heard fear in her voice. But that morning, her words came out in fragments, broken up by these shallow, shaking breaths. "Daniel," she said, "someone's been in the lighthouse. Someone's been writing in Thomas's book." I drove 9 hours from Boston without stopping. I didn't even pack a bag. Something in the way she said it, the way her voice cracked on the word writing, made me understand that this wasn't something that could wait. Ashford Point sits on a narrow finger of rock about 2 miles off the coast of Blackwater, Maine. You can only reach it by boat, and only when the weather permits. The locals don't go there. They haven't gone there since 1987. When I asked the harbor master, a weathered man named Carl Brennan, to take me out, he looked at me like I'd asked him to sail straight into hell. "That place is wrong," he told me, and he didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. I found another boat. A fishing vessel operated by a kid named Marcus who couldn't have been older than 22. He didn't know the stories. He didn't grow up here. He just saw the $200 I was offering and figured it was easy money. I didn't correct him. The crossing took 40 minutes. The November sea was iron gray and angry, waves slapping against the hull hard enough to rattle my teeth. The whole time, I watched the lighthouse grow larger on the horizon. It's a classic New England design, white tower with a black cap, maybe 60 feet tall. The keeper's house is attached at the base, a 2-story structure with windows that face the sea. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful, picturesque even. It wasn't until we got closer that I noticed the windows. Every single one of them was dark, not just unlit, dark. They seemed to absorb the pale afternoon light rather than reflect it. And standing at the base of the tower, small as a doll from this distance, was my aunt. She was waiting for me on the small concrete dock, and when I climbed up to meet her, I barely recognized her face. Margaret Holloway has always been a composed woman, dignified, the kind of person who irons her pajamas and considers a raised voice to be the height of poor manners. But the woman standing before me looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her silver hair was escaping its pins. Her hands wouldn't stop moving, twisting around each other like she was trying to wring something invisible from her own skin. "Thank you for coming," she said, and her eyes kept drifting past me, up toward the tower. I didn't know who else to call. "What happened?" I asked. "What did you see?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned and started walking toward the keeper's house, and I followed because I didn't know what else to do. The path was overgrown with dead grass and sea thistle, and our footsteps crunched against the frost-hardened ground. The air smelled like salt and something else, something I couldn't identify, sweet almost, like rotting flowers. The Historical Society has owned this property since 1995. she said as we walked. We come out twice a year to document the deterioration, take photographs, make sure vandals haven't broken in. The state wants to tear it down. We've been fighting them for decades. Thomas Marlowe was a member of our society before he took this position. He was my friend. Her voice caught on that last word. Last Saturday, I came out for the autumn inspection. Alone. I know I shouldn't have, but the weather was perfect and I didn't want to coordinate schedules with the rest of the board. I brought my camera, my notebook, the master key. Everything was exactly as it should be. We had reached the door of the keeper's house. It was painted red once, but the color had faded to something closer to rust, to dried blood. The hinges were green with corrosion. I went through every room, Margaret continued, documented water damage in the kitchen, noted that the stairs to the second floor are becoming unsafe, took photographs of the beacon mechanism, and then I went to check on Thomas's logbook. We keep it in a glass case in the study, climate-controlled, preserved. She stopped with her hand on the door handle. Daniel, I've been in this lighthouse perhaps 40 times over the past 30 years. I know every inch of it. I know where the floorboards creak. I know which windows don't close all the way. I know the exact spot where Thomas used to sit when he wrote his entries. And I am telling you with absolute certainty that someone has been inside this building. Someone opened that case. Someone took out that book. She turned to look at me, and in her eyes I saw something that made my stomach clench. And someone wrote a new entry, dated November 15th, 1987, the day after Thomas disappeared, in handwriting that is identical to his. She pushed open the door, and the smell hit me like a physical force. Salt and mildew and that same sweet rot I'd noticed outside. Stronger now. Almost overwhelming. The interior was dim, lit only by whatever gray light managed to seep through the filthy windows, and as my eyes adjusted, I became aware of a sound. Ticking. Not a clock. Not mechanical. Something organic. Something wet. It was coming from somewhere above us. And that's when I noticed the footprints on the floor. They led from the front door across the dusty parlor and up the winding stairs toward the tower. They were bare feet, human-shaped, and they were still glistening, still damp, as if whoever had made them had walked through just moments before we arrived. Margaret grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Those weren't here on Saturday," she whispered. "Daniel, I swear to you, those weren't here. From somewhere far above us, at the very top of the lighthouse, I heard the sound of a pen scratching against paper. Hashtag the lighthouse keeper's logbook ended mid-sentence in 1987. Last week, someone started writing in it again. Hashtag part 2. The handwriting changed after the third entry. I need you to understand what I mean by that. It wasn't just different, it was wrong. The first new entries, the ones dated from last week, they were shaky, uncertain, like someone learning to write again after years of not holding a pen. But by the fourth entry, the letters had become something else entirely. They stretched and twisted across the page, the ink bleeding into patterns that hurt my eyes to follow. Some of the words curved upward, defying the lines of the paper, as if whatever was writing them had forgotten how human writing was supposed to look. I sat in my cramped office at the Maritime Historical Society, the logbook open under my desk lamp, and I read what should have been impossible. The entry was dated 3 days ago. It read, "He is learning to see through my eyes. The light calls to him now as it called to me." I should not have answered, but the singing was so beautiful. He will understand soon. He is reading this now. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I looked up from the page, suddenly aware of how quiet the building had become. The fluorescent lights above me flickered once, twice, then steadied. Outside my window, the October night pressed against the glass like something hungry. I turned back to the logbook, my hands trembling so badly that the pages rustled. The next entry was dated 2 days ago. I can feel him breathing, in and out, in and out. His heart beats faster when he reads these words. Does he know that I can hear it? Does he know that every time he touches these pages, the connection grows stronger? The light is almost repaired. Soon it will shine again. Soon everyone will see. I slammed the book shut. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the thunder of my own pulse in my ears. This was a prank. It had to be. Someone at the Historical Society, someone with a sick sense of humor, had gotten hold of the logbook and decided to mess with whoever found it. That was the only explanation that made sense. But even as I told myself this, I knew it wasn't true. The logbook had been locked in a climate-controlled archive for 37 years. The chain of custody was documented. No one had accessed it since 1989, when a researcher had photographed the pages for an academic paper about lighthouse operations in the Pacific Northwest. I had pulled the access records myself just yesterday, because something about those new entries had bothered me from the moment I first saw them. The ink was fresh. The pages were still slightly damp in places, as if they had been written within the past few hours. And the handwriting in those final entries, the twisted, stretched letters that curved wrong, they matched samples I had found in Edward Marsh's personal correspondence from 1986. A dead man's handwriting. I should have called someone.